And welcome again to another edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I am your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. As you know, we talk about on these podcasts issues related to our own longevity, the implications of longevity to our families and our community. If you'd like to contact us with any ideas or suggestions, you can email me, rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. Today's guest is the author of this very, very interesting and personal book called In Stroke's Story, My Caregiver Story, In Stroke's Shadow, Shadow, very Jungian. A story of a caregiver. Its author is Kyle Ruffin, and we are honored that she joins us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning. First of all, welcome, Kyle. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to read the book, In Stroke's Shadow, My Caregiver's Story. I want to begin with something you write at the very, very beginning, because it seems to be common in so many issues of caregiving when people join this new life stage, which I really believe it is a new life stage. You write at the beginning of the book, in the space of 24 hours, I went from looking out primarily for myself to having to consider everything through the filter of mommy's care. I had no children, so the role of caregiver was completely foreign to me. Like a new parent, I had to learn on the job, only I didn't have 9 months to prepare. What was it like when you got the call?
It was completely out of the blue. I was on my way to a meeting. I had just started my own marketing business and it was beginning to take off. And on the way to the meeting, I got a call that changed my life forever. My mother, who was very vibrant, very young, world traveler, she was only 68. There was no indication that she had anything wrong. So when I got the call, I had to respond immediately, and I learned that she was having the first of several strokes. And it was like you kind of go into autopilot, right? You do what you know you need to do in order to survive the moment. And that's what I did. And I just had no idea where to begin, what this journey was going to be like, because I didn't expect it. And I, like the book said, I didn't have any time to prepare. It was like the blink of an eye, my life changed forever.
It's so many of us enter this new life stage just like you did, with just a call. A call comes, even though on a subconscious level we may contemplate because our loved one may be, declining. But when the call comes, it just restructures everything. You write that, in essence, you lose yourself in the role of caregiver. What does that mean? How do you lose yourself? Because you were running a business, you were active, you were, engaged in this, in your own professional growth and development, but yet you lose yourself as a caregiver. How?
Well, for me, what that looked like was, for the first 4 nights, I spent the night in a hospital chair by my mother's side. I had a husband at home, and I completely divorced myself of any outside relationships, and I completely devoted every waking moment, and in a lot of cases sleeping moments, to my mother. And in some ways those were the easy decisions to make because I knew where I needed to be. It was those decisions that were about making healthy choices for myself where I really kind of forgot how to do that, because everything was through the lens of what it takes to make sure that my mother is okay and that she has what she needs in that moment.
So towards the middle of the book, you have this really, really interesting image that when I read it, I made a note in the book to ask you about. While watching a man swim in the ocean parallel to the shoreline, I saw the perfect metaphor for caregiving. You remember that? What,
Absolutely.
could you just, I mean, I'm reading this and wow, that's very, very interesting. A man swimming in the ocean parallel to the shoreline as a metaphor for caregiving. Walk me through that. Unpack that for me.
Well, as I was watching him, he was swimming in a pretty high current, and the waves that were uh, perpendicular to him were large and looked like they were going to overtake him. Looked like he was going to just crash to the seafloor every single time a wave approached him. And instead, he just lifted and lifted and lowered with each wave. He never lost his stride. He never looked like he was in any sort of danger. He just continued his pace. And what I was talking about was the fact that often my caregiving situation would look like it was going to overtake me. If you were to ask me before something happened what I could handle, I would have not answered the things that I was ultimately able to handle. And I just tried to uh, be mindful of the fact that the solutions are there, and if I stay the course and look for the answers, I will be lifted up to the place where solutions dwell. And then I would get lowered back into a period of calm that sometimes I would believe that calm was going to last, but it never did. And then another wave would come. And that was kind of the rhythm of caregiving for me.
We talk a lot about now in caregiving of self-care as how critical importance it is. And you allude to, what did you do to take care of yourself?
Well, I've always been somebody who appreciates going to the gym, so I maintained that routine. I once things kind of calmed down, I was able to kind of restore some relationships, some close relationships with friends who, I was still able to have somewhat of a social life. My mother had an awesome posse of friends who would help to provide me with the respite I needed
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that I was able to run this marathon. And I can't say enough about having such a great support system. So those were among the things that I did. I'm a certified yoga instructor, so I relied heavily on yoga. I love meditation. I saw therapy. I had a wonderful therapist who walked me through a lot of my family history so that I could understand, more of the picture of what I was dealing with. And I just tried very hard to to make sure that I was ready for just about anything that came along. Because if I hadn't, um, I don't know. I think I feel for people who aren't mindful of the fact that you need time to prepare and to be out of crisis, so that when the crisis does occur, you can uh, face it. Some people, I think, live in that crisis for too long, even if it's only in their heads. And I knew better than to do that.
You alluded to the posse and you alluded to the therapy, which is extremely important in helping to navigate a lot of the feelings. Because in caregiving, so many emotions from family of origin stuff get played out. You write about that. In fact, you write about it quite a lot throughout the book, not just one chapter, but your father and your sister Lynette, they appear as very powerful supporting characters in this book. What was channeling them, how was that helpful to you in caring for your mom?
Well, it was helpful to me in that I learned after losing my father, who was only 58, in 1995, and then I lost my sister. She was only 42 in 2002. And my father died suddenly. And when you lose somebody close to you suddenly, at least for me, I ended up with a lot of regrets. Things I never said, things I wish I had done with him or for him. And with my sister, even though her illness was over an 8-month period, I had some regrets when it came to how I handled that situation as well. So when my mother got sick, um, I was determined not to have any regrets when this was all over. I didn't know how it was going to end, but I couldn't carry any more sadness in my heart for things that I wished I had done when my father and my sister were alive.
You know, you write also about faith. You have this wonderful line, one which I did underline, um, about your own faith community. You write, we were Baptist, quote, we were Baptist, baptized in the sea of suffering with no shoreline in sight, unquote. What does that mean?
Well, I think it's sort of, how martyrs are born, right? Even if you're alive, still, you're taught that you have to sacrifice yourself. And if you're not sacrificing yourself, then you're not living a godly life. So and I think that got translated in my family to if you are a caregiver, the needs of the person you're caring for always are more important than your own needs. After all, they're the one who's suffering. You are not. And, there are lots of passages in the Bible that say, the child must sacrifice themselves for the good of the parent. And I know my mother believed very strongly in that. And there were expectations that she had that were different than the expectations I had of the dynamics of our caregiving relationship. And many of hers were born out of her religious belief that you always sacrifice yourself for the betterment of someone else.
Was was your faith important to you in this journey?
Um, well, I'm still grappling with my faith.
That's
um,
it's a lifetime grapple.
I'm not someone who attends church or spends a lot of time in religious settings. And on the one side, I could say I'm maybe agnostic, uh, but on the other side, I've read the Bible 5 times through. And every morning I say the prayers of protection that my grandmother taught me when I was a child. So I'm like sort of hedging my bets, right? I'm making sure I have all the bases covered because faith is not about knowing for sure. So my actions might indicate that I am someone of faith. And but my faith in myself, my faith in my understanding of the universe, as much as one can understand it from this seat right here, those things did carry me through.
We're speaking again with Kyle Ruffin, the author of In Stroke's Shadow: My Caregiver Story. Technically, the book is available through by how?
The book is available. It's available on Amazon and on BarnesandNoble.com. But if you go to my website, mycaregiverstory.com, there are several other links that you can purchase the book through, including a couple of local bookstores that have it on their websites. Ida's Bookstore, which is located in Collingswood, New Jersey, and Inkwood Books, which is in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Both of them are carrying it, as well as Harriet's bookstore in Philadelphia.
So that's for the people who are not living in the greater Philadelphia area. Those are places around where we are. But if you're all over the world, because the podcast gets picked up, go to the Great God Amazon and you're probably in good shape, or Kyle's website, which again, Kyle, is
mycaregiverstory.com.
one of the issues that you raise throughout the book. I think you started with an approach when mom just had gotten sick, and you talk about moms, or you call her mommy, uh, which is in itself, the way you describe it is what you always called her, and that's what you're going to. That's who she is. Mommy's reluctance to trust the medical system, and um, the culture that your mom represented. And then you also talk about the the cultural difference growing up as in an African American culture in the United States of America, with the approach to the medical system and the trust in the medical system. I think, and you do allude to the Tuskegee incident. Could you? I think it's important for people to understand um, uh, that there are cultural differences in the populations in the United States of America, of how we look at the how that culture looks at the medical system based upon previous cultural experiences. Could you? Because I think that's part of what you're teaching in this book. Could you walk us through that?
Well, my mother was born in 1941. And I don't have the exact dates here now,
It's
but
okay.
the Tuskegee trials uh, were happening during her lifetime, and they were things that people in our community were very aware of, and that uh, created a deep-seated mistrust of the medical system. Uh, Even though there were Black medical professionals who were part of the experiments, it was just proof that you just can't trust anybody. And my mother was someone who never went to the doctor. Uh, the reason that her stroke uh, came as such a surprise was because she had never been diagnosed formally, because I couldn't tell you when the last time was that my mother went to the doctor. And my grandmother was someone who would always say, you don't go to the doctor, you'll end up sicker if you go to the doctor. And my mother was very mistrustful of all the medications that a lot of her friends at her age were taking, and that she didn't want to do that, and she would try to handle things naturally, even after the strokes. And she started having seizures as a result of the strokes. Um, she felt like she could handle her health naturally, and that she would just put more cumin in her food. And even though I explained it to her that she was well beyond the natural remedy stage, she was not going to give up on her belief that she could handle this herself. And when she was in one of the assisted living facilities, we used to have to sneak medication into her feeding tube, because each time the nurse's aide would walk in with the medication, my mother would point to each pill, and even though she had aphasia, she would, through body language, ask, like, what is that for? And the nurse would tell her, and she would shake her head no. And then they'd go through the whole handful of pills, and she would shake her head no. So we had to find a way to trick her into taking medicine, because she really believed that she knew better than the medical system, and that she knew better how to overcome this major health crisis. Unfortunately, in the end, um, when we had to have the feeding tube removed, and we could no longer fool her into taking her meds, I think that's when things really kind of started to kind of fall apart. And that's when she had her third stroke. and didn't come back from that.
Is the generation that you represent, which is basically the boomers, is is it different now with the trust of the medical system, or is there still in the African American community? I know it's a generalization, but in your experience, let me put it in your experience, is there still this carryover of what your mom's generation had, or has it changed?
I think for a lot of people, it still is the same.
Really?
We are going through the worst pandemic ever, and people that I know and love have basically decided they're not getting a vaccine because they don't trust the vaccine, and or they don't think it's important enough to go out of their way to get the vaccine. So I think there are some people, uh, and I think that it spans cultures, it spans generations. I think there's always going to be a sense of mistrust of any system that is driven by capitalism.
Yeah.
It's just innate. But yeah, us not being a monolithic people, I think there are a lot of us a lot of my friends and relatives ran out to get the vaccines, but others, even after having COVID and having suffered through COVID, decided that they had better ways to spend their time.
Yeah, it's
So no explanation.
no, it's just fascinating because we're, as you said, we're living through this in the last two some years, and the differences in approaches to the science away from politics. I mean, the whole thing was politicized, and that was horrible, and people died because of it. But I think a lot of people learned that the cultural differences and the United States has so many different cultures embedded in it. I think it was an assumption. Well, science says this, everybody's going to rush, and then like your mom's experience and some of your friends and some of my friends, not so fast. You also write in this period of time in the rehab, and I think you use with your mom, who you obviously write about, and it comes through the book. This is a very strong woman, very strong woman. And you write that there was a concept, I think, in one of the rehab centers, battle of wills, which I think is the phrase that you used. But you also use this phrase that the stroke, mom's stroke, was a gift. It was a gift. Now, some people may say, this is a gift I don't necessarily want, but what do you mean? What happened as a result of what was this gift, Kyle?
Well, the stroke. One of the uh, things that happened was that she lost all of her filters. My mother grew up in a very proper family, had very strong beliefs, was not somebody who communicated emotion. She could be very stoic. I don't think my mother ever told me she loved me growing up, except for that one time when I wanted to take her car back to college on New Year's Eve. And she told me I couldn't because she loved me and she cared about whether or not I was safe. But that's the only time I can remember my mother telling me she loved me. And not that she didn't love me. I know that she did. Uh, but after the stroke, she couldn't uh, kind of hold back those feelings and emotions anymore. So for the first time in my life, when I did something for her that she appreciated, she showed me that she appreciated it. Um, when I um, uh, was having a conversation with my mother, or actually a speech therapist was having a conversation with my mother about having children, and my mother's blurted out. This was during the period where she could still speak, where before the second stroke, where her aphasia had gotten better, and she said to the speech therapist that she never wanted children. And my mother would have never said that out loud.
Wow. Right.
But when she said it, suddenly it was clear to me that that was why our relationship was so tense and why my sister and I never wanted children. Neither of us could explain why, but we both thought we were flawed. But when my mother was able to be honest and say what she truly felt, suddenly that piece of the puzzle fell into place. And some might be upset if they heard their mother say that, but it didn't upset me. It actually made me feel like I had a better understanding of our relationship. And to me, that was a gift. And again, the gift of her being able to show me appreciation uh, when she never would have before. She would tell her friends how proud she was of me, but she would never tell me.
Right.
And her friends would tell me, but she would never tell me. So,
It's just fascinating, and a lot of the work that we do in the Jewish Sacred Aging Project about the power of family of origin stuff, the stuff that happens, the messages that get sent to us either um, frontally or subconsciously or by actions rather than words as we're growing up, and how we intuit them and how they bubble up at various, especially as we get a little older. And when life and life moments like the caregiving, that's why caregiving is such a, we call it a new life stage. I really do it as a new life stage, and so many things happen. You you conclude this journey with this very interesting scene with the removal of life support, and you you write it in a very lovely sentence or paragraph. I forget whether it's a sentence or a paragraph. That when you're there in the moment, it wasn't, I think, quote, not a Lifetime or Hallmark movie, in the, which we've all seen. Walk me through that moment, if you can.
well, the doctor had finally convinced me to remove life support from my mother after her third stroke, and I began calling her friends and family to let them know that this was the end, and they all assembled around her, and they removed the life support, and we were all standing holding hands. Someone was praying, um, and eventually uh, the doctor said it would be maybe an hour or so before she uh, transitioned, and it turned out to be like 18 hours. And so people started to just kind of fall away from the prayer circle and go home. And I slept in the chair again that night. And the next day was when she finally passed. But you have this image of people like wailing, and there's gnashing of the teeth, and everybody's just kind of dying inside to watch this loss. But it was just a transition that was a part of life. Like when you're in that moment, it doesn't feel like it's something that's like movie worthy. It's just something that is the next thing that happens after what we've been through for the nearly 3 years that we were on this journey. Um, was I disappointed? No, I don't think I wanted all the, people bowing and screaming and wailing and all that. Um, but yeah, it was definitely a lot less poetic than I thought it was going to be.
Was it spiritual?
It had its moments of spiritualness when, like I said, in the beginning, as they pulled the tube,
Right.
we were praying. All my mother's friends and family are very devout. So yes, there was a lot of prayer, and we all just kind of stood there waiting. So eventually the prayer stopped, and people began to go home because it was dinner time. And my cousins and I stayed throughout the night and listening for the machines to make whatever noise that we were told they were going to make when the end had come. I mean, I don't want it to sound anticlimactic,
No, no,
like,
not
because
at
that's
all.
not
Not at all.
fair to her. Uh, but it wasn't dramatic. And I'm grateful again that it wasn't that, because who needs that after all that time of suffering through, um, you know, a life that wasn't my own anymore.
Kyle Ruffin, the author of In Stroke's Shadow, My Caregiver Story, available at bookstores and Amazon. Thank you very, very much, Kyle, and for this lovely gift, the gift of this book. And I hope many, many people get to read it, because I think it will help them in a variety of different ways. So thank you for your time and on your expertise, and good luck, and just stay healthy, stay safe, and stay healthy. So be well.
Thank
Be well.
you.
And to
Thank
all
you
of
very
you,
much.
thank you again for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast and TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. Again, if you'd like to make a comment or suggestion, email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. And if you'd like to make a tax-free donation to help support our work, go to the website, jewishsacredaging.com, and scroll down to the donate button. Click on that and just follow the prompts. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media Companies here in beautiful Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And we thank our expert producer, Steve Lubetkin. Again, thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address, and I look forward to greeting you on our next Seekers of Meaning podcast and TV show. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Stay healthy. Shalom.